and welcome. Excited to hear more about Engineers Without Borders.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. It says you disabled screen sharing. Is that something you can?
You are enabled now.
Okay, awesome. There we go. Well, thank you for having me. While I pull that up, like Michelle said, I'm a civil engineer, like Eric. Let me know when you can see my screen. I want to be sure that I click that. Okay. So I'm from North Dakota originally. I went to school at University of North Dakota. I've lived in the Twin Cities since 2012, and I work for an engineering company down here, Great River Energy. That's kind of the engineering hat that I wear by day. Is I do the structural and geotechnical and siting and routing of high voltage transmission lines throughout Minnesota and North Dakota. But the engineering hat that I wear by night and on the weekends is that of Engineers Without Borders, and so that's what I'm here to chat with you all about. And I'm going to present on one specific project, but EWB it's a lot bigger than just this one project. I mean, just in the Minnesota chapter alone, we have a couple projects in Guatemala. We have a project in Peru right now, a water project. But we also do things domestically as well. We just finished a project in Colfax, Wisconsin, where we brought an old library up to code. And we're also working with the Lake Street Council, trying to figure out how we can help. There's a massive rebuild effort happening now to take care of the businesses that were destroyed and a lot of the looting and rioting that happened after the killing of George Floyd. And so we're working with them to try to figure out how we can help a lot of those business owners on Lake Street. So we do a lot of stuff domestically too. So with that said, I'll get into the Patak school project. So this is a project in Guatemala that we're just entering phase 2 of it. So I've got 20 or so slides to go through. I don't think I'll take to the very end. So, we should have time for questions. So feel free to ask me questions as I'm going through, or I'll save them till the end. So this is a neat little drone shot of the school work site. We're kind of up in the Western Highlands, and I'll show you in the next slide about where we are in the country. But we were down there last November of 2019, and took this drone shot so you can kind of see the foundation of the school is what we were excavating when we traveled down there in November to kick off the project. So the community of Patak, it's about 500 people. They're scattered throughout the mountainside and the Western Highlands. They speak a language called Quiche, which is an old Mayan dialect. They don't speak Spanish for the most part. Maybe a handful will. But that's kind of a big driver for the need for a school. If their kids don't learn Spanish, basically their kids won't stand a chance. So that was a big reason for, despite all of their needs, that the community was in agreement. A new school was definitely at the top of their priority list. The community is about an hour from the nearest town or city, I guess you could say. It's only about 5 miles as the crow flies from that town, but it's about an hour truck drive because of just how rugged the terrain is from that town to this community. This community is super remote. We are working with the municipality of San Andreas Sacabaja, the municipality that we're working within, and then our in-country NGO or non-governmental organization is actually EWB-USA in this case. So Engineers Without Borders, in some countries that we work in have in-country offices, and in others they don't. And Guatemala is a country, luckily for us, our project team, where they do have an in-country office, and so it makes things a lot easier. But a requirement of all EWB projects is to have an NGO. So in this case, it's EWB-USA. So here's our project timeline. We started off in March of 2019. That's where we traveled for an assessment trip, which is basically to meet the community, to assess the need for the project and verify the need for the project, kind of just come to an understanding of expectations, what they should expect from us and what we should expect back from them. And so that kicked off the project, and last summer is when we dove into the fundraising and design of the school and kicked off construction this last November. So now the school is completed. We had a little bit of hiccups with the COVID-19 pandemic, kind of halted construction. But the school is done, and now we're transitioning into phase 2. And so that's kind of what I'm going to touch on here is phase 2 of the project. So phase 2 is going to involve latrines for the kids and a retaining wall for a slope that we found between the March trip and the November trip had broken away quite severely. So the slope I'll show you later, that's kind of breaking away and encroaching on the school, the new school pretty quickly. And so we have to kind of created a new project for us to protect our first project. So, and this is a neat shot. We're just playing soccer with some of the kiddos. They have this little stick net, and they were pretty pumped to play soccer with us. So that was a daily activity where we got to get away from doing some of the labor. So this is the trip in March when we traveled. Our one female engineer that was with us, Stephanie, she was able to sit down with a lot of the women of the community and kind of interview them and get a feel for their need and make sure a school was definitely at the top of their needs. And despite their many needs, they need access to water, they need access to healthcare, they don't have transportation to get to that local town an hour away. Despite all of that, they were in agreement a school is definitely the top of their priority list, so their kids can learn Spanish and hopefully, you know, kind of stand a chance at life. So that was a pretty humbling thing to learn. We interviewed, I think, maybe about 40 to 60 moms and women of the community when we were there in March. So last summer was a lot of the design and fundraising. This is just kind of a cover sheet of the school, the set of plans that we sent down there to kick off construction. This is kind of a rendering of what the final school would look like. And fast forward to November of last year, and we kicked off construction. So this is kind of a groundbreaking ceremony of us and some of the locals that did a lot of the work. There's probably an additional 20 locals that did work that were not pictured here. But this on the left-hand side, this is our team. This is me here in the green shirt and the Twins hat. And then you can kind of see back here, they're old latrines that just aren't used anymore because they're just outdated and used up and just kind of gross, to be honest. So these latrines is what part of this next phase will replace. Here's another drone shot. After we excavated the footing for the school about 1 meter deep, which took honestly only about a day of pickaxing and shovels. That's what we did for excavation, and it's amazing what you can do with about 40 Guatemalans because we knocked that out in a day. We didn't think it was going to take only a day, and it did, so we were blown away. And then you can kind of see rebar cages that we tied in place at the bottom of the excavation. So pretty much this was at the end of day 3 on site, and day 4 was when we started pouring the footing. And here's a shot of the concrete pouring. So basically we just had a 3-2-1 concrete mix where we'd put 3 parts of this, 2 parts of this, 1 part of this, and everybody had their job. They in their 5-gallon buckets, and we just had a line of locals with barrels, and we had just the 1 gasoline concrete mixer, and it was just a continuous mixing and pouring until it was done. And so we got the whole pour done in 1 day, which we were thrilled about. And back here, this guy, can you all see my cursor on my screen? Okay. This guy in the white hard hat back there, his name was Cleto. Cleto was the foreman that we hire, so we do hire a little bit of skilled labor just to kind of oversee construction, especially when we're not on site. And Cleto was the man. He totally knew what he was doing, which was something we were a little bit nervous about when we went down there. And Cleto totally saw the project through from start to finish over the last few months. So these are some of my favorite pictures from the trip. This little guy on the left side of the screen, he took my gloves and put them on his own, and just thought it was the most funny thing. And he belly laughed for like 4 minutes straight. It was just like, I don't know. It was one of the more funny moments of the whole week. So I had to get a picture of him laughing with my gloves on. And then on the right side, this is probably my favorite picture of the whole trip, where this is Matt, or Gringo Grande, as some of the locals like to call him. showing the kids the vantage point from the drone. So, I mean, probably for the first time in their lives, you know, they got an aerial shot of their community from the drone that we brought with. And just, if you see that, you can see the sheer joy in all their faces. So that was probably my favorite shot. That was snapped all week long. And then after we left, after our week down there, yeah, the walls went up. So these are just kind of some progress shots of construction while we were not on site. So it was a poured concrete foundation, and then these concrete CMU blocks were our walls. And here was the walls completed. Just needed a roof, windows, and doors. And then there's kind of the final product. Once COVID hit and we had a front overhang to put up front here for shade, that was basically put on pause until they were cleared to work again. So we had about a 3 or 4 month period there maybe where there was no work allowed to be done, and then these pictures were taken probably from the last couple months of putting that front overhang in. And so here's about the finished product. You know, with the exception of a lot of cleanup that needed to be done still, but it's a 4-bedroom school, or a 4-classroom school. It'll house about 65 kids. I think the old school we replaced, which was built out of adobe, it was crumbling. It would flood in the wet season. That held maybe 30 to 35 kids comfortably, and they had about 45 elementary age kids that went there. So it's quite an upgrade for them, and we've heard from our boots on the ground contacts down there that they're pretty pumped with the new product. So now is our next steps of the project. So this is the photo I shared at the beginning, and we're going to replace the old latrine here. Basically, it's an outhouse with a new, more sanitary one that's more manageable. And then you can see here, this is the slope that is eroding after the wet season. So between March of 2019 and November of 2019, when we traveled, this thing had broken down quite a bit. And so that kind of gave birth to the retaining wall project that we're now working on. And so you can kind of see here again, the slope eroding. Again, these are some drone shots from the trip of November when we were building the foundation. And again, some more shots of that slope. So those are the next steps. So now we've basically done our design. That is at about a 60% design phase set right now. We actually sent that down to Guatemala just this week to have our boots on the ground, our EWB liaison travel to the community and show them the plans, so we're sure that, you know, they're bought in with what we're proposing to do. So that was kind of an exciting milestone. So design is, for the most part, pretty much done. However, it's fundraising now that we're working on to make this come to bring the project to completion. And so you can kind of see here, basically this is where the retaining wall will go. Let me back up here and show you. So this is kind of that slope that's eroding at a kind of a 90-degree here. You can kind of see my cursor. And then this is an existing structure down at the bottom. So that's kind of where the new retaining wall will go, kind of in that corner. And then the latrines will be nestled kind of in that, against that retaining wall on the one side.
Did you guys assess all of the different kind of geographic spaces available, I would imagine, to try to figure out what's the best, or how did that space get chosen?
Yeah, good question. So we did. We're kind of limited with the land we're allowed to work with because, you know, that there are you know, plots of land. So, you know, owner A owns this little plot of land, owner B owns this little plot of land. Whether or not that's documented, who knows? But that's kind of the agreement. And so, basically, this area up here is what we have to work with, and then just this little corner down here is what we have to work with. All of this is owned by other, you know, farmers or stuff like that. And the area up here at the top where the front of the school now is, that's kind of their only like communal gathering space, and that's where they go to for prayer, that's where they go to kind of have community meetings and that sort of thing. And so they did not want the latrines up there for that reason. And so basically we had this little strip behind the school to work with, which was not preferred because there's a major drop off on the back side of that. Yeah, you can kind of see here, there's a major drop off on the back side of the school.
Yeah.
So it was basically either that behind the school or down here below. And so when we were there in person, we got them to kind of acquiesce that, okay, down below would be the best spot given what we have to work with. So that's where we're rolling with, and we're going to hope that when our contact meets with them this next week, that they're still in agreement with that. So that's the hope.
Got
it. Tyler?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Is that an earthquake-prone area? And if so, what kind of accommodations did you have to make for that?
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. I forgot to mention that. It is. They do have regular seismic activity there, which was a big reason why their existing school was crumbling. The one that they had constructed out of like adobe blocks, which is basically like dried clay. And so we constructed the new school per U.S. seismic code. So it is earthquake resistant to a degree, definitely better than any building they have there. And it was sad to learn we didn't hear that this community had structures collapse and earthquakes in recent history, but there's a lot of these really rural, really remote communities out there. And we had heard that sometimes a school will collapse or a house will collapse, and there have been men, women, and children killed in earthquakes out there. It's not a regular thing because it's pretty mild earthquake activity, but it does happen on occasion. So yes, it is a seismic, or the school is designed for U.S. seismic code. And so this is just kind of some profiles of what that side slope looked like, existing and proposed after the wall is constructed. We'll kind of have the wall will go up, and then we'll kind of have like a geotextile fabric in here to kind of promote vegetation growth, to kind of prevent this natural grade from eroding after the wall is constructed. And so by doing that, we can eliminate, or we can reduce the required height of the wall on this slope, which will greatly reduce costs and just greatly reduce impacts to the surrounding landscape. So, and this is kind of what the final design is for the wall and the latrine. So it's a dual pit latrine. So we'll have a boys' room and a girls' room. There will be 2 pits. The idea is basically this whole structure will have the ability to slide from one pit to the other. So once the existing pit is filled up with waste, they can seal that off, slide the structure over top to the empty pit, allow that existing waste to kind of break down biologically. And then once the second pit gets filled, they can empty that waste and then slide it back over. And it's just kind of a back and forth process. So that's kind of the idea that we went with. We did push for more sanitary options that would try to utilize some rainwater from that the roof of the school may collect. That would enable some sort of flushing. But they were very resistant to that, and it got to the point where eventually we didn't want the conversations to get combative, and so we finally had to just kind of acquiesce and go with a standard, basically outhouse latrine style toilet system. That's what the community wanted, so that's what we'll give them. It'll definitely be better than what they have, and hopefully hopefully the next time this thing gets designed and rebuilt, we'll have a more sanitary option with running water. But that's what we're going with for the latrines for this community anyway. So that's the next step of the school, and we're hoping to hopefully start building this year yet. At the end of 2020, it'll probably go into 2021. The idea is to be done by next spring. Their school year is kind of fluid, but it's kind of January-ish to October-ish. And so we're hoping that by the, you know, the first part of their next school year, everything will be done and they'll be able to have 100% use of all of the new facilities. So that's what I have for you.
Amazing.
I want to mention we are working with the Buffalo, Minnesota group on a district level grant. We do have 5 clubs contributing to that grant right now. Buffalo, St. Louis Park, the New Hope, Robbinsville, Crystal One, the Prior Lake Club, and a Minneapolis club. And we might have a 6th with Waconia. We're waiting to hear back from them. And so we're hoping to submit the grant application by the end of this month, September. So the grant committee can review it with the October wave of applications. So I know that you guys may not be able to contribute, and that's fine. I know fundraising has been especially challenging this year in 2020, but if you're able to pitch $500 at it, you know, we'd gladly take it. So just food for thought for you all, and all of the donations will go directly to materials of the school, primarily gravel, sand, cement for the concrete, and then, you know, a lot of the miscellaneous plumbing stuff for the latrines.
Yeah, Tyler, there's a pre-existing building where you're doing the retaining wall. What is that building, and does that stay there?
Yeah, good question. That is a high school, or it's their high school, and yes, it will stay there. So the building, the new school we constructed was for the elementary aged kids, which is kind of like, from what I understood when we were down there, it's kind of like our equivalent of kindergarten to like 5th-ish grade, and then this is the high school, which is basically like 5th grade on to maybe 9th or 10th grade at most, and then after that they usually will depart school and have to go work. So yeah, that building will be staying there. That's their high school.
Did the high school have a pre-existing latrine?
Nope, the high school does not, and so everybody would be using the one up top. But honestly, it seemed like when we were there, nobody used the latrine. And I can see why when we were there. I'm not sure where a lot of folks use the bathroom when we were down there. It seemed maybe like a lot of kids would just kind of walk out into a field and take care of business that way. So the new latrines will probably be satisfying both schools, the upper and lower schools.
Yeah, thank you.
Tyler, I have some questions if you've got a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a number of topics. I have a question about latrines. I have a question about fundraising. I have a question about your role with EWB, and I have a question about COVID. I'm saying them out loud in hopes that I'll remember all of them.
Okay.
Okay, so COVID first, I guess I'll start with the last thing. How was this community impacted? How have they been impacted by the pandemic?
So that happened, I mean, we were just there in November. We don't have direct communication with the community because they're so remote. But we just kind of keep our thumb on the pulse through our EWB-USA liaison, who he lives in a community that's a few hours from there. So we don't get regular updates on how they're doing, but what I do know is that basically the school year was kind of put on hold. So the new school was completed, but they, I think, only recently started using it. So they haven't used it since pretty much all of 2020 until maybe within the last few weeks. And then other than that, I'm not sure how the community has handled health-wise with the pandemic. We really haven't heard. I wish I had more info on that one.
One would hope that because of their isolated location that they're somewhat secure, but that also certainly if there is exposure, that presents a lot of challenges for them.
Right.
Okay, well, keep us posted on that when you find out more.
Yeah, I will.
Latrines. So coming from a female perspective, I'm thinking about young girls going to school and not having access to any sort of bathroom situation, and what do they do when they start menstruating, and do they just not go to school then? I'm thinking about all of our partnerships in Rotary with the organization Days for Girls, that creates we actually did a service project in our club where we sewed a bunch of these washable pads that could go to girls all across the world, because we know that there are days of school that these young girls miss when they start having their periods and they can't go to school. So did you have any, I don't know if you heard anything about that when you were there, if your female colleague heard anything?
You know, we didn't really, not much. We haven't heard much on that topic. We didn't really get into asking too many questions about health and welfare and female
It's kind of
health.
a personal question too.
Yeah, it is. And this, you know, these remote communities they're very, you know, they're pretty shy and pretty conservative, I think, especially with outside entities coming in. You know, I think from what I do know is that there is I'm not sure how to define it, but it's almost like an entity within remote regions of Guatemala that are led by women, that, you know, they'll come into the communities maybe every other week for a day. And when we were there in November, we saw it happen one day. There were 3, I don't think they were doctors, but some sort of nurse, I guess. And it would be these 3 basically go and they occupy an area, and then any member of the community can come and see this person if they have health issues. But I guess to answer your question about, you know, female health and how little girls handle menstruation in these communities, I'm just not sure. I could see us perhaps, because we would like to continue working with the community. That's always the goal, is to not just implement a project and leave. We try to, you know, continue our relationship. So I could see us perhaps, you know, having a project down the road that might focus on health versus education. It's a possibility.
Well, and in this specific topic, the health of the girls is directly impacted to their ability to experience the education.
Right.
So I love the fact that you are so connected to several Rotary clubs. It's very exciting to see. So I will plant a seed with you that if this is something that you guys want to pursue going forward, District 5950 is very connected to this other nonprofit called Days for Girls. And before you guys go the next time, we could load you up with several of these washable pads that you could distribute throughout the community as just an option for the girls.
Yeah.
So I'll just plant that seed there.
Yeah.
Rotarians, we make connections.
Yeah. No, that's good. You said Days for Girls.
Days for Girls. Yep.
Okay,
because essentially these products provide days in school for the girls.
Okay.
So they're not having to stay home during their week or whatever.
Yeah. Got it.
And so speaking of the connection with other Rotary clubs and the fundraising, how else is EWB fundraising for projects outside of Rotary connections?
So last year, the budget for the school, we had targeted about $40,000 for the entire school structure. About 5,000 of the 40,000 came from individual Rotary club contributions. The remaining 35,000 came from kind of a 50-50 split of donations from like engineering companies that we work for. So like the company that I work for, they throw money at it. You know, we've got a team of maybe probably 20 engineers on just the school project. So a lot of the money came that way. You know, a lot of different companies have given back funds and charitable organizations like that. So that was one way. And then another way is just individual donations. You know, just reaching out to friends and family. And we have a fundraising website that we had set up that I think our EWB-MN website could take you to. So a lot of individual donations came in. We raised probably close to $15,000 just from people donating individually. And we have since this year, you know, we learned a lot because this school project was the first for a lot of us. The Minnesota chapter was kind of dormant for a while, and it really only kind of kicked back into gear in the latter half of 2018. So a lot of us, myself included, have only been around for about 2 years. And so this year we have actually teamed up with a coffee grower down in Guatemala who are providing coffee to us at wholesale price, their wholesale price. And then, we turn around and flip it to friends, family, whomever. And we've been doing that for about 3 months now. And I think we've raised about $5,000 that way. So we're figuring it out. Most of us are, engineers or some sort of technical background. We're not marketers and schmoozers, so it's a struggle, but we're getting better at it.
So are you the fiscal agent then? The funds are brought specifically to EWB?
Yeah, so my role with this project is, I guess, project manager. So I'm kind of with this specific project within our umbrella. I'm the project manager, but I'm also the treasurer for the whole chapter too.
Okay.
So I kind of see the dollars for all the projects within our Minnesota chapter. Yep.
I have my final question because I did actually remember them all. Tyler, do you get paid for any of this work?
No, none of us do. Yeah, it's all volunteer work. We pay our own way down there. Like, we have to use our own vacation from work. We pay for our own flights. We pay for, our food, whatever. So yeah, none of us receive any compensation for this.
Wow.
Now, with that said, there are people within EWB-USA that have a salary, but none of us in the Minnesota chapter get paid at all.
And that's incredible. So this really is a huge amount of service that you all are giving to this project and to this community. And like Rotary, none of us are getting paid for the work that we do. Certainly at Rotary International, there are folks that have, full-time jobs that do get a salary, but the boots on the ground people, like everybody here on this call, we're not getting any compensation other than the goodwill
Right.
that we receive. So that's really great. So thank you for indulging all of my questions.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the questions. Those are good ones.
I have another question. I don't know how much time we have. I don't know what time it is, but where do you stay when you're there?
It kind of depends on the location of the project. So with this project, we stayed down at the town that's about an hour's drive away. Most projects, we would stay with the community. I think the reason we didn't stay with this community was because they were super remote. There's no running water. There's really no place for us to stay. And then if we were to stay within the community, we didn't want to eat up the little bit of resources they do have. They're very, very accommodating and super kind. And so chances are they would be butchering some of their few chickens to feed us every night. And we had such a large group. We had 8 of us, 9 of us if we include our translator. So, it was kind of maybe the second time around, we might stay up there with them and hire a cook to stay with us too. But that's kind of a comfort level thing, especially with these really remote communities. So we stayed down about an hour away.
Wow. That's a 2-hour commute. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's in the back of a truck. And I could show you pictures all day, and it's a rough ride.
Any spinal injuries?
No, not that I know of. But there were times where, the driver rides the brakes and we sit there and have to pull off, the single lane, narrow lane, hugging the mountain with a steep drop off and let the brakes cool down. And that happen all the time.
Wow.
That's all I had. Any more questions for me?
Yeah, I just want to hop on real quick. I just want to say it's great work that you're doing. Amazing work, actually. And Kristen and I are kind of texting back and forth, and we'd love to donate and help you out. So then a couple of questions I had. What compressive strength did you design the concrete to? Just kidding. Totally kidding.
Well, I think we used...
No, but I was curious, did you bump into anything when you were building it that was maybe unforeseen, boulders, or did you get rain when you had the footing areas open? Sometimes, things happen, right?
Right. Yep. No, we got really lucky with rain. The weather cooperated the whole week we were there. However, we were there in November, which is kind of the beginning of their dry season. So they have like our summers, their wet season, our winters, their dry season. So it gets super arid. So that worked out well. As far as what we encountered excavation wise, we had taken about 5-foot deep soil borings with like a hand auger, and we went 5 feet deep. So we had a pretty good idea, and we were able to take those. Eric, you probably know, we have an engineer that works with Braun. So, you know, that guy that worked with Braun was able to take the samples back and analyze the soil in his lab. So we had a pretty good idea with what we were dealing soil wise. And it was pretty much just dense clay and kind of loose sand, depending on where you were in the school footprint. But for the concrete, we designed for, I think, 2,500 PSI, and I think we were able to find cement for 3,500 actually. So, and we actually did take compressive cylinders. We took test cylinders and we brought them back to the States. Oh no, I'm sorry. We took concrete cylinder samples, and we made a connection. One of our members has a connection to an engineering student in the University of Guatemala in Guatemala City. So we were able to get 3 cylinders to a student at that university who broke the cylinders at 28 days, and all 3 breaks came back above design. So we were thrilled about that.
Nice.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a great question. The PSIs as well as anything else you ran into. There's dinosaur bones or interesting you might find. This is fascinating. Are there other questions, folks? Rotarians always have just fantastic questions. I let every speaker know, plan for time, because a bunch of excellent questions are gonna arise.
Yeah, you guys, these are good questions. I was trying to find a picture of taking the cylinder tests, but I guess I can't find them right now.
We know a little bit more about construction now, or feel like we do, even if we don't.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Tyler. This has been fascinating and also inspiring. Thank you for what you do. And we're glad as a club to be able to know more about it. And we'll see if indeed we can support it. We've got more initiatives than we do dollars at this point in time, but you never know. This is really amazing work. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great pictures too. Really great pictures.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so the last thing that we do here in Rotary is recite the 4-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build a goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, everybody, for your time today at the Rotary Club. Have an excellent afternoon.